Everyone. This is session number 13 of the Advent of Divine Justice, and we're going to start with the opening prayer. Let me share my screen. Everyone see it?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Needs to be bigger. Oops.
You need it bigger? Okay.
No, I can do it with my iPad. That's fine.
Okay. Oh my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the host of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer whatsoever thou willest. And now for you, Caisson.
Thank you, Jeremiah. And
Thank
welcome
you.
back, everybody. So here we are. Let me share my screen. Let me share my screen. Go back to the first one. Okay, there we go. Share. Okay. So, as you recall, this is the Crimson Academy's Exploring the Advent of Divine Justice. We're starting paragraphs 17 and 18, okay? If you are using your Advent of Divine Justice here, paragraph 17 is on page 12. It starts, what other community? What other community? What an awesome opening. Okay, and then if you're using this one, it starts on page 7, okay? Right at the top, it says, what other community? Paragraph 17 is a long paragraph, so I'll be reading that one. And then, Suresh John, if you could read paragraph 18, okay? So, the key points that we're going to be addressing in paragraph 17 through 18 is the building of a framework for nascent institutions, the construction of the Baha'i house of worship, securing the allegiance of royalty. This is so cool. And the establishment of Baha'i schools, as well as other major achievements. So if you recall in the last paragraph, paragraph 16 that we just covered, the beloved guardian was addressing the early American Baha'i community, this North American Baha'i community that had undergone tests, challenges, tribulations, and sufferings, right? And it's gone through prominent defections. And he says, what other community, even in that one, has achieved such, heroism, such sacrifice? No other community, East or West, has done its like, right? And now in this paragraph 17, you're going to see where the beloved guardian really hits it home and brings it and says, this community, the North American Baha'i community, America, has achieved such a distinction. So let's get into it. This is going to be awesome. And then we're going to dissect these paragraphs and see all these questions. So paragraph 17 is question after question after question, where the beloved guardian is really hitting it home and saying, what other community other than the North American Baha'i community has done this, done this, done this? What other community other than the North American Baha'i community has done this, done this, done this, and done this? You'll see this. And it's a repetition of what other community. And it's so cool. Okay, here we go. Are you ready? Okay. What other community, it can confidently be asked, has been instrumental in fixing the pattern and in imparting the original impulse to those administrative institutions that constitute the vanguard of the world order of Baha'u'llah? What other community has been capable of demonstrating with such consistency the resourcefulness, the discipline, the iron determination, the zeal and perseverance, the devotion and fidelity so indispensable to the erection and the continued extension of the framework within which those nascent institutions can alone multiply and mature? What other community has proved itself to be fired by so noble a vision or willing to rise to such heights of self-sacrifice or ready to achieve so great a measure of solidarity as to be able to raise in so short a time and in the course of such crucial years an edifice that can well deserve to be regarded as the greatest contribution ever made by the West to the cause of Baha'u'llah? What other community can justifiably lay claim to have succeeded through the unsupported efforts of one of its humble members in securing the spontaneous allegiance of royalty to its cause, and in winning such marvelous and written testimonies to its truth? What other community has shown the foresight, the organizing ability, the enthusiastic eagerness that have been responsible for the establishment and multiplication throughout its territory of those initial schools which, as time goes by, will, on the one hand, evolve into powerful centers of Baha'i learning, and on the other, provide a fertile recruiting ground for the enrichment and consolidation of its teaching force? What other community has produced pioneers combining to such a degree the essential qualities of audacity, of consecration, of tenacity, of self-renunciation, and unstinted devotion that have prompted them to abandon their homes and forsake their all and scatter over the surface of the globe and hoist in its uttermost corners the triumphant banner of Baha'u'llah? Who else but the members of this community have won the eternal distinction of being the first to raise the call of Ya Baha'u'llah Pa in such highly important and widely scattered centers and territories as the hearts of both the British and French empires, Germany, the Far East, the Balkan states, the Scandinavian countries, Latin America, the islands of the Pacific, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand, and now more recently, the Baltic states? Who else but those same pioneers have shown themselves ready to undertake the labor to exercise the patience and to provide the funds required for the translation and publication in no less than 40 languages of their sacred literature, the dissemination of which is an essential prerequisite to any effectively organized campaign of teaching? What other community can lay claim to have had a decisive share in the worldwide efforts that have been exerted for the safeguarding and the extension of the immediate surroundings of its holy shrines, as well as for the preliminary acquisition of the future sites of its international institutions at its world center? What other community can, to its eternal credit, claim to have been the first to frame its national and local constitutions, thereby laying down the fundamental lines of the twin charters designed to regulate the activities, define the functions, and safeguard the rights of its institutions? What other community can boast of having simultaneously acquired and legally secured the basis of its national endowments, thus paving the way for a similar action on the part of its local communities? What other community has achieved the supreme distinction of having obtained, long before any of its sister communities had envisaged such a possibility, the necessary documents assuring the recognition by both the federal and state authorities of its spiritual assemblies and national endowments? And finally, what other community has had the privilege and been granted the means to succor the needy, to plead the cause of the downtrodden, and to intervene so energetically for the safeguarding of Baha'i edifices and institutions in countries such as Persia, Egypt, Iraq, Russia, and Germany, where at various times its fellow believers have had to suffer the rigors of both religious and racial persecution?
Such a matchless and brilliant record of service, extending over a period of well-nigh 20 years, and so closely interwoven with the interest and fortunes of such a large section of the worldwide Baha'i community, deserves to rank as a memorable chapter in the history of the formative period of the faith of Baha'u'llah, reinforced and enriched, as it is, by the memory of the American believers' earlier achievements. Such a record is in itself a convincing testimony to their ability to befittingly shoulder the responsibilities which any task may impose upon them in the future. To overrate the significance of these manifold services would be well nigh impossible. To appraise correctly their value and dilate on their merits and immediate consequences is a task which only a future Baha'i historian can properly discharge. I can only for the present place on record my profound conviction that a community capable of showing forth such deeds, of evincing such a spirit, of rising to such heights, cannot but be already possessed of such potentialities as will enable it to vindicate, in the fullness of time, its right to be acclaimed as the chief creator and champion of the world order of Baha'u'llah.
Excellent, Suresh. Thank you so much. So there we are, dear friends. This long paragraph 17, where the beloved guardian is pouring his heart, his love out to this community, the North American Baha'i community, and asking these questions. What other community can be confidently be asked, has been instrumental in fixing the pattern, imparting the original impulse to those administrative institutions? So let's get into it. We have all of this study coming up. It's going to be exciting. So this is our introduction. Here, the beloved guardian highlights this matchless record of the North American Baha'i community. And in paragraph 17, the beloved guardian, Shoghi Effendi, spells out some of the major achievements of the North American Baha'i community over the previous 20 years through a series of 11 rhetorical questions. He reiterates in paragraph 18 his conviction that a community capable of showing forth such deeds, of evincing such a spirit, of rising to such heights, already has the potential to be eventually the chief creator and champion of the world order of Baha'u'llah. So these are some of the key points, dear friends, that we're going to go through. So let me see who's with us. Miss Linda, if you could read this key points on this slide.
All right. Shoghi Effendi praises the resourcefulness, the discipline, the iron determination, the zeal and perseverance, the devotion and fidelity of the North American Baha'i community, so essential for building and extending the framework of the Baha'i administrative order. He also highlights the crucial role of that community in fixing the pattern and imparting the original impulse to the institutions leading the world order of Baha'u'llah. The framework of the Baha'i administrative order are the institutions that are ordained by Baha'u'llah in his writings and further expanded by Abdu'l-Baha in his will and testament.
Excellently read, Miss Linda. Thank you so much. So interestingly, I'm going to tie another paragraph that's going to be coming up, okay? And this paragraph comes, it's in this text that it's, for me at least, it's easier to quickly find things because it's got headings on it. It's to the Baha'i youth, okay? It's on page 58. Why am I tying this to this paragraph 17? Is because the beloved guardian here is addressing qualities of the North American Baha'i community. Qualities. And these qualities are resourcefulness, discipline, iron determination, zeal, perseverance, devotion, and fidelity, right? So these are qualities of the North American Baha'i community. Now, why I'm tying this to the Baha'i youth on in this one, page 58, and I'm going to just find the exact paragraph in Advent, so you'll all be on board. I believe it's in the 100. Yes, 101. It's in paragraph 101. It says. It's paragraph 101, it says, to the Baha'i youth of America. Okay, why I'm tying this to the Baha'i youth of America from paragraph 17 is because these similar qualities. Now, okay, scroll down in paragraph 101. It says, though lacking in experience. Haven't we heard that about the early American Baha'i community? Though lacking in experience, right? And faced with insufficient resources. Didn't we read that in paragraph 16? Insufficient resources. Yet the adventurous spirit which they possess, adventurous spirit, North American Baha'i community, adventurous spirit, okay? Which they possess, the vigor, alertness, and optimism they have thus far so consistently shown qualify them to play an active part in arousing the interest and securing the allegiance of their fellow youth in those countries. So here in paragraph 101, and it's the only paragraph technically that is directly addressed to the Baha'i youth, is paragraph 101, but I've tied it to paragraph 17, which actually is a tie to showing how this North American Baha'i community is like the youth. It's limited in resources, limited in experience, but it has that zeal, it has that perseverance, it has that devotion, it has that fidelity, and it has that will and desire, you see? And you can see the same qualities as the beloved guardian describing in paragraph 101. So cool. I love how that was an interesting tie together. Okay, then also in paragraph 17, the beloved guardian is highlighting this crucial role of the community in fixing the pattern and imparting the original impulse to the institutions that are leading the world order of Baha'u'llah. And also the framework of this Baha'i administrative order are these institutions that are ordained by Baha'u'llah, namely the charter documents, the will of His Holiness Baha'u'llah, the will and testament of His Holiness Abdu'l-Baha. So this is the framework of the Baha'i administrative order. The birth and the primary stages in the erection of the framework of the administrative order of the faith signaled the first epoch of the formative age. So this is something that we'll be talking about coming up. In 1902, the governing board of the Baha'is of Chicago, known as the House of Spirituality, asked Abdu'l-Baha for permission to build, not a hose, I apologize, my chubby fingers, a house of worship in Chicago, The royalty referred to by Shoghi Effendi is Queen Marie of Romania and one of its humble members, and is a reference to Martha Root. So this was, the Beloved Garden always doesn't have to always spell everything out, but it's implied here that the royalty referred here by the Beloved Garden is Queen Marie of Romania. And a major achievement of the early North American Baha'i community was the development of Baha'i schools throughout the continent. And we'll address that also coming up in our slides. So now we're going to start dissecting paragraph 17. This was an incredible paragraph, one of the longer paragraphs in Advent to Divine Justice. In paragraph 17, the Beloved Guardian highlights the major contributions of the American Baha'i community in the development of the Baha'i administrative order through two rhetorical questions. So the first one is, in these questions, he initially praises the resourcefulness, the discipline, the iron determination, the zeal, perseverance, devotion, and fidelity. Now, this is such importance that I'm going to do a rhetorical question to the class and to everyone who is listening. And this rhetorical question is, all of these qualities, resourcefulness, discipline, iron determination, zeal, perseverance, devotion, and fidelity. Do you see these qualities in your spiritual assembly if you're serving on an institution? If you're serving on an institution or a committee or a task force, are you displaying it yourself? And how are you helping the institution, the committees, the task force to be displaying these qualities? Resourcefulness, discipline, iron determination, zeal, and perseverance. Perseverance means keep at it, no matter what challenges are thrown at you, right? It's that keep at it kind of attitude that the youth are renowned for. I was very scared of even skateboarding because I was scared of any challenges are thrown at me. But it's that kind of mentality that any problems are thrown at the youth, they just keep doing it. And that is the kind of mentality that is the young mentality. And that young mentality is that zeal, go at it, the spirit, that attitude of just going regardless of what problems may be thrown at you, but also being resourcefulness. Resourcefulness comes also that aspect of wisdom, thinking ahead also. So it's an interesting tying of how this community has undertaken their challenges. But this is something that we should pose also to our young institutions, our spiritual assemblies, our committees, our task force. How are you implementing these qualities that we're called upon to display into the chamber? And how are we displaying them internally? Are we being resourceful? Are we practicing zeal? That level of love and excitement and energy in our meetings, or are we just kind of begrudgingly going on, just going with the flow? Or are you joyful? Zeal means energetic, right? So this is the qualities that the Beloved Guardian is calling upon us to. So let's carry on. So essential for the building and extending this framework, supporting the multiplication and maturation of these institutions, these Baha'i institutions. The Beloved Guardian then highlights this crucial role of the community in fixing this pattern. Where have we heard this word pattern before? I think I've heard this pattern word before at least 100 times in the last 20 years, right? This emerging pattern of growth. And so where has it come from? Here at the Universal House of Justice, as you can see how this is all tied together, one unfolding revelation, and coming from from the Blessed Bab to Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha, the beloved guardian, and the supreme body, this unfolding pattern. So the community in fixing this pattern, this pattern is also the pattern and framework with this, also the institute process. It's all part of this pattern. And imparting the original impulse to the institutions leading to the world order of Baha'u'llah. So let's dissect some of these questions. And I put them in bullet points because there were so many of them in one paragraph that it could overwhelm you. So these are you can see, this is slide one slide. I've put these questions, and they're also multi-part questions. So this is, you can see here, I've 5, 10, 13, okay? So the first one, what other community, it can confidently be asked, has been instrumental in fixing the pattern and imparting the original impulse to those administrative institutions that constitute the vanguard of the world order of Baha'u'llah? First question. Instrumental, fixing the pattern and imparting the original impulse to those administrative institutions that constitute the vanguard of the world order of Baha'u'llah. The North American Baha'i community, the American Baha'i community has been in the vanguard and has been instrumental. What other communities, second question, has been capable of demonstrating with such consistency, resourcefulness, discipline, iron determination, zeal, perseverance, devotion, fidelity. Fidelity means faithfulness, faithful. And faithful from what? When we talked about that, the challenges, the opposition, the defections. So they have been faithful. What other community? To the devotion, the fidelity, so indispensable to the erection and the continued extension of the framework within which those nascent institutions can alone multiply and mature. So now the framework is coming into being. So after the passing of His Holiness Abdu'l-Baha, right? This community, you said, what other community has now been so faithful and not fallen away in the sense of following the covenant breakers, and now is with the continued extension of the framework? What is the continued extension of the framework? It's the will and testament of Abdu'l-Baha under the beloved guardian as well as the administrative order. So now it says, what other community has been so faithful, has practiced such iron determination, such zeal and perseverance? Then, third question, what other community has proved itself to be so fired? Oh, I love the language of beloved God. What other community has proved itself to be fired by so noble a vision, or willing to rise to such heights of self-sacrifice, or ready to achieve so great a measure of solidarity as to be able to raise in so short a time and in the course of such crucial years an edifice? What are they talking about? What is he talking about? An edifice that can well deserve to be regarded as the greatest contribution ever made by the West to the cause of Baha'u'llah. What edifice are they talking about? This is the Mashulescar, right? The house of worship. So it says, what other community has proved itself to be fired by so noble a vision and in such a short period of time and under such crucial years? God, when were they doing this? They were doing it during World War I. They were doing it during Great Depression. They were doing it during the worst financial possible times, right? And yet they managed to accomplish, per se, the impossible. And really, and so this was here, the beloved guardian says, what other community could have done such this? Question 4, what other community can justifiably lay claim to have succeeded through the unsupported efforts of one of its humble members? And remember, in America, the Most Great Peace, again, similar language of one of its humble members. I love that. The Beloved Guardian, American Most Great Peace, written in 1933 here, and here in Advent of Divine Justice, 1938, again, of one of its humble members in securing the spontaneous allegiance of royalty to its cause, and in winning such marvelous and written testimonies to its truth. And we're going to explore every one of these, okay? So this is, and we're talking here about Queen Marie of Romania. And this is, and this humble member, Miss Martha Root. So we're going to even see her marvelous written testimonies also. What other community has shown the foresight, the organizing ability, the enthusiastic eagerness? Now look at this, dear friends. We've already, this is now per se the 5th question, okay? How many times have we talked about enthusiastic eagerness already? Might be different synonyms, right? Zeal and different words, but you can see the Beloved Guardian's point already, that this community, this American Baha'i community, is displaying eagerness, enthusiasm on a level never before displayed, except per se in the cradle of the faith, with the sacrifice of the heroes of the community. But this is an incredible accomplishment of this early American Baha'i community. And those, dear friends, and I want to stress this, those, my dear friends, are our spiritual descendants. Those are our spiritual descendants, and we are standing on those shoulders. So we have great responsibility. So carrying on, what other community have had the foresight, the organizing ability, the enthusiastic eagerness to do what? Have been responsible for the establishment, multiplication throughout its territory of those initial schools. Greenacre, right? Greenacre and Geyserville, and these schools were the initial schools, and we're going to be talking about them. These initial schools, which as time goes by, will on the one hand evolve into powerful centers of Baha'i learning. So these Baha'i schools will evolve into powerful centers of Baha'i learning, as well as fertile recruiting ground for the enrichment, consolidation of a teaching force. Then we carry on. What other community has produced pioneers? We talked even just a few about some of these pioneers. And God knows, when we start progressing in this course, you're going to see, oh, I'm excited. Part 21, we're going to have so many awesome pioneers highlighting on them in part 21. We're right now in part 7, right? We've got a long road to go. Part 21, we're going to hit on so many of these amazing ladies in the cause, okay? Because when we get to that part, it's in the latter paragraph 101 off the top of my head. In paragraph 101, the Guardian hits it home. He says, in the history of this faith, categorically, the history of this faith, I'm not talking about just the Baha'i faith, in the history of the whole world, compendium of faith, there has never been a time when there has been so many ladies arising to champion a cause. It's so awesome in this day. How many lady heroines have there been championing the cause? I mean, from Miss Martha Root to General Jack, Marion Jack, what a lady, to Agnes Alexander, to Effie Baker, you name it, all these incredible ladies. And if you don't know who these are, you will learn them. We're going to come up in the course. You're going to be like, oh my God. To Corinne True, to, there's so many. And we're going to be studying who they are. To Miss Dorothy Baker. And the Beloved Guardian he just lays it home and says, what a day, what a day, what a day that we have all these incredible heroines. And they are Americans that have gone out and championing the cause, blessing and bringing that luster to this American continent. So that's in that question, it says, what other community has produced pioneers combining to such a degree of essential qualities: audacity, consecration, tenacity, self-renunciation, just giving up their self and going out, consecration, so deepened and of faith, audacity, courageous, so to be like these fierce lionesses going out into the field of service. This is what these incredible ladies were, fierce lionesses. Unstinted devotion that have prompted them to abandon their homes, forsake their all, scatter over the surface of the globe, and hoist in its uttermost corners the triumphant banner of Baha'u'llah. Who else but the members of this community have won the eternal distinction of being the first to raise the call of Ya Baha'u'llah Pa in such highly important and widely scattered centers and territories as the hearts of all these places, dear friends: British and French empires, Germany, Far East, Balkan states, the Scandinavian countries, Latin America, islands of the Pacific, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and now more recently, the Baltic states. From the Duns that went to New Zealand, Australia, to the Balkan states, this is General Jack. We're going to be exploring to Leonora Armstrong, to going all the way to the South America, to Miss Martha Root, traveling the globe 4 times round the whole earth. What a lady. So we're going to be exploring these incredible itinerant teachers, sacrificing, self-renunciation, consecrated, unstinted devotion of these heroines. And that's coming up, and that's going to be truly awesome. Can't wait for that one too. But this is the pioneering power, this power that has been infused into this North American continent. And the energies of these heroes, and this is what in paragraph 17, the Guardians just boom, 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 hitting it home, so that the friends reading this great letter is saying, yeah, the North American Baha'i community got it going on, right? But then you're going to see his question coming up later on, and that's a foreshadowing of, he's saying, yeah, this community is really, really awesome, but then he, as they say, flips the script, and it's going to be pretty cool. But he wants to first say this community is on a different league. Okay, this is what he's saying. So who else but those same pioneers have shown themselves ready to undertake the labor, to exercise the patience, provide funds required for translation, publication, in no less than 40 languages of their sacred literature, the dissemination of which is essential prerequisite to any effectively organized campaign of teaching? The lion's share of the funds comes from the North American Baha'i community. What other community can lay claim to have had a decisive share in the worldwide efforts that have been exerted for the safeguarding and the extension of the immediate surroundings of its holy shrines, as well as for the preliminary acquisition of the future sites of its international institutions at its world center? So here, even one of the dear friends, and we're going to explore that incredible lady sacrificing. This is Miss Collins, Amelia Collins, her incredible contributions. And we're going to explore who that lady was, of how sacrifice, what she did in her contributions also to ensure all the properties were given and bestowed upon the faith, and all the surrounding acquisitions. And what other community can, to its eternal credit, claim to have been the first to frame its national and local constitutions? This is an incredible honor also that this community has. It's the first. to have its national and local constitutions, and thereby laying down the fundamental lines of the twin charters designed to regulate activities, define functions, and safeguard the right of its institutions. Every single other local spiritual and national spiritual assembly is modeled after the charter documents of the Constitution of the United States, how it was done. So this was the first. What other community can boast of having simultaneously acquired and legally secured the basis of its national endowments, thus paving the way for similar action on the part of its local communities? So to protect its national endowments too, what other community has done that? So all other communities, even the beloved guardians here is saying, thus paving the way for similar action on the part of its local communities. What other community has achieved the supreme distinction of having obtained long before any of its other sister communities had envisaged such a possibility, the necessary documents assuring recognition by both federal and state authorities of its spiritual assemblies and national endowments? So long before any of its other communities around the world, it has had the supreme distinction of being recognized at the federal and state authorities. And finally, this is also was mentioned in America, the Most Great Peace. What other community has had this privilege and been granted the means to succor the needy, to plead the cause of the downtrodden, and to intervene so energetically for the safeguarding of Baha'i edifices? And if you recall, in America, the Most Great Peace, it was this to safeguard the house of Baha'u'llah in Baghdad, right? Which is a site for pilgrimage. And so what other community has had this, has had the time to intervene so energetically for the safeguarding of Baha'i edifices and institutions in countries such as Persia, Egypt, Iraq, Russia, and Germany? And this community has not only done that, but done it with distinction. And this community has done this achievement with great distinction. So let us now start marching through these questions. And so the framework of the Baha'i administrative order is the institutions ordained by Baha'u'llah in his writings, and further expanded by Abdul Baha in his will and testament. And they consist of the local, intermediary, and universal house of justice. So local spiritual assemblies, national spiritual assemblies, and the universal house of justice. Baha'u'llah has ordained the establishment of the elected councils of his future administrative order and referred to them as houses of justice. And the context of the statements made by Baha'u'llah clearly shows that he's referring to two different entities, the Universal House of Justice and the local houses of justice. And in the Kitab Aqdas, Baha'u'llah ordains the establishment of the local houses of justice. The Lord hath ordained that in every city a house of justice be established, wherein shall gather counselors to the number of Baha, and should it exceed this number, it doth not matter. The word Baha in this statement has a numerical value of 9, based on the Abjad numbering system. The local houses of justice are currently called local spiritual assemblies. So that is the two institutions that in the Kitab Aqdas were instituted by His Holiness Baha'u'llah, namely the Universal House of Justice, as well as the local houses of justice, which is, in this day and age, is the local spiritual assemblies. Okay? Subsequent to the provisions revealed in the Kitab Aqdas, revealed supplementary passages in a number of other tablets. In the tablet of Ishraqat, he states, "This passage now written by the pen of glory is accounted as part of the most holy book. The men of God's house of justice have been charged with the affairs of the people. They, in truth, are the trustees of God among his servants and the day springs of authority in his country." And this is a reference to the universal house of justice. So this is in Ishraqat. This is in the tablets revealed after the Kitab Aqdas. So tablets of Baha'u'llah revealed after the Kitab Aqdas, in the tablet of Ishraqat. And it's in that tablet, it mentions here the men of God's house of justice. Then, in reference to the institution, the National Spiritual Assembly, this is His Holiness Abdul Baha provides more explicit explanation of the houses of justice in his will and testament. In addition, he introduces the secondary houses of justice and explicitly states, in all countries, a secondary house of justice must be instituted. And this is in his will and testament. It's on page 14. And this institution is currently called the National Spiritual Assembly. The birth and primary stages in the erection of the framework of the administrative order of the faith signaled the first epoch of the formative age, starting with the ministry of the beloved guardian and completed in 1944 to 46. And the reason they put it 1944 to 46 is interesting. I don't know why it says, because it's the 100th anniversary of the Declaration of the Faith, so that's the centenary year, 1944, but it puts it 1944 to 46, the closing of the first century after the Declaration of the Bahá'í. The crowning institution of the framework, the Universal House of Justice, was elected in 1963, and that ended the second epoch of the formative age. And here you can see the members of the Universal House of Justice that was elected in 1963. So let's explore these institutions, how they came about. So the development of the Baha'i institutions in the United States started as early as 1899, when a council board of 7 officers administrating the North American continent was established in the city of Kenosha. Do you remember I was talking about the Kenosha Baha'i community with Ibrahim Khairullah going there and having his classes? And there was this picture of the first 18 believers in Kenosha, and they posed for their photograph. And this is Mr. Byron Lane. He's the first believer, the first declarant of the believers in Kenosha. This was the community that I mentioned in our last session that grew to such a degree that the churches got together to try to attack the faith at that point in time. So this is the community of Kenosha. In 1900, Abdul Baha instructed a number of Baha'i teachers. And this is when Jeremiah was talking. He was talking about his ambassadors to come and to protect the faith. He instructed a number of his Baha'i teachers, Haji Abdul Karim Tehrani, Haji Mirza Hassan al-Khorasani, Mirza Asadullah, and Mirza Abul Fazayel, to travel to the United States to restore confidence of the community, undermined by the defection of Ibrahim Khairullah. So these were his 4 ambassadors he sent to the United States because of the defection of Ibrahim Khairullah, right? They traveled to the United States to restore confidence. The consolidation work carried out by these travel teachers proved very effective, and in a very short time, they succeeded in dispelling the doubts implanted in the hearts of Baha'is by Khairullah. deepening their understanding of the fundamental verities of the faith, and giving an impulse to the formation of the nucleus of the Baha'i institutions. So here's a picture. This is Mr. Thornton Chase, right? It's Mr. Thornton Chase. There's Mirza Abu Fazil right here. And Thornton Chase, the first Baha'i in the West, he's meeting the Baha'is in the East. And so this is a picture in April 1907. The consultative bodies were elected in Chicago, New York, and northern New Jersey between 1900 and 1904. A Baha'i Publishing Society was established in Chicago in 1902, and the Baha'i Bulletin was initiated in New York to disseminate the teachings of the faith. Another periodical, Baha'i News, appeared in Chicago on March 21st, 1910, and a year later was renamed the Star of the West. This period also witnessed the emergence of many American travel teachers who traveled in the United States, as well as Europe, the Far East, and the islands of the Pacific. So this establishment of bulletins, as well as publications such as Star of the West, Baha'i News, was also a first. Having this type of injection of literature, events, what is going on in the community, and guidance from the source of the faith, from the beloved guardian, was also a first. So these are a way of not only injecting that energy and zeal and encouragement and guidance. This was an incredible event that was happening at this early stage in the development of the institutions and also in emergence of this Baha'i community. So the Baha'i, this is the Board of Council of the Baha'i Assembly of New York City in 1900. So this is one of the, per se, first spiritual assemblies in the United States. So seated left to right is Mr. Clement Wilson and Howard McNutt, Arthur P. Dodge, and Charles E. Sprague. And standing left to right is Anton Haddad and Frank E. Osborne, Hooper Harris, William H. Hoare, Andrew Hutchinson, and Edwin A. Putnam. And Anton Haddad was considered an honorary member to that Board of Council, Baha'i Assembly of New York City. So, and if you remember, he went back to, very shortly after, went back to, I think it was Lebanon, off the top of my head, went back. So the major works of Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha and various articles written by Eastern Baha'i scholars were translated, published, and disseminated between 1904 and 1908. So this was also another important year. If you remember, the challenges of this early American Baha'i community was that it was distant from the cradle of the faith, but it also had very little materials in the language, in the original languages, Arabic and Persian. So during this period of between 1904 and 1908, major works of Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha, various articles written by Eastern Baha'i scholars, were translated, published, and disseminated. So this was an incredible effort, incredible time for getting some of the major works and translations done. And further consultative bodies were formed in Washington, Boston, and Spokane. And during 1909 to 1911, various national initiatives emerged, the formation of the Baha'i Temple Unity, publication of Star of the West, and the commencement of the construction of the Baha'i Temple in Chicago. So not only were they started getting out translations and disseminating these translations, now they also formed Baha'i Temple Unity to start getting this idea of having a house of worship and to start the commencement for construction of it. So this is one of the earliest pictures I've ever come across in the United States. This is having a gathering. This is in 1910. This is about Baha'i convention in the Masonic Temple, Chicago, 1910. And here Mr. Hall is presiding. So this is one of the first earliest pictures I've ever come across of a Baha'i gathering in the United States. And here, this is 1911. This is Baha'i Temple Unity Convention, as I mentioned. Now they're trying to get together to have this idea of having a Baha'i house of worship here, a Mashulescar. So they're having Baha'i Temple Unity. Then delegates and friends, they get assembled at the geometrical center of the temple grounds and invoked the greatest name as their faces are turned towards Akka. So this is 1910. And so they're gathered at the temple grounds. The visit of Abdul Baha to the United States and Canada. So now we're talking about his period of 8 months, 239 days in 1912. It had a significant impact on this Baha'i community. It resulted in proclamation as well as growth of the Baha'i community. And growth, it may not be in numerical terms. The Baha'i community did not grow that much with Abdul Baha's visit, but it matured. Its understanding matured. Its institutions matured. Its vision matured. Its obedience and its level of understanding matured. You see, this was the maturation of the community. And so he was planting seeds. He was sowing seeds across the entire United States. And so this was an incredible, when I'm talking about, it was growth of the Baha'i community. He was working to like a divine farmer. He was going across the lands and looking for fresh soil. And that fresh soil was the heart. So he was literally casting these seeds everywhere. And he was looking for the fresh soil of the heart. And this is what His Holiness Abdul Baha was doing. In 1921, on assuming the guardianship, the beloved guardian wrote to the American Baha'i community that every locality should elect a local spiritual assembly, and the Baha'i Temple Unity should evolve into a national spiritual assembly. The American Baha'i community diligently followed the guidelines given by Shoghi Effendi. The evolution of the Baha'i Temple Unity to the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada was completed by 1925. There were 45 spiritual assemblies in the United States by April 1928, and steadily increasing to 64 by 1936. And that's around the number. When 1938, there was roughly 64 national spiritual assemblies at that time. So you see that Baha'i Temple Unity, that right here, this Baha'i Temple Unity 1911, these friends in this Baha'i Temple Unity, that was early National Spiritual Assembly. Isn't that amazing? And then in 1925, when the beloved guardian wrote, he says, all of these should evolve into national spiritual assemblies. So these are the members of the National Spiritual Assembly when it came into being as a National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada. So this is the chairman, Montfort Mills. Roy Wilhelm was its vice chairman, and Mr. Horace Hawley, and its treasurer, Florence Morton. Amelia Collins Mr. Ali Kuli Khan, Siegfried Schopflicker, Alan McDaniel, and Carl Scheffler. And if you remember, when we were doing American the Most Great Peace, we read about Mr. Montfort Mills and what he did to defend the community in Iraq, the House of Baha'u'llah in Baghdad, and all the oppression of around these communities. When we're going to be looking at this, what other community, to its credit, has defended the downtrodden? And this is really through the efforts of Mr. Montfort Mills. What an incredible soul he was. And we read that in our study of America and the Most Great Peace. Carrying on, dear friends. So now we're going to start looking at how did this house of worship come into being? And let me first check my time. How are we doing? Oh, we're doing great. Okay. Anytime anyone has any questions, don't hesitate. Jump in. This is your class, okay? So I'm just carrying on. So now we're going to get into how did this house of worship come into being? Because remember, one of the questions was, refers to the Baha'i house of worship in Wilmette. He says, what other community has proved itself to be fired by so noble of it? God, I love this language. I cannot get past how awesome the beloved guardian's language is. What other community has proved itself be fired by so noble a vision, or willing to rise to such heights of self-sacrifice, or ready to achieve so great a measure of solidarity as to be able to raise in so short a time, in the course of so crucial years, an edifice that can well deserve to be regarded as the greatest contribution ever made by the West to the cause of Baha'u'llah. So this, what other community can have done this? So this is now we're going to be exploring this edifice. So this was taken just a few months before Advent of Divine Justice came out. These are, as you know, remember, December 25th, 1938. This is a picture, October 1st, 1938. This is the four sides of the gallery section were completed. So how did this house of worship come to be? So in 1902, the governing board of Baha'is of Chicago, known as the House of Spirituality, they asked Abdu'l-Baha for permission to build a house of worship in Chicago. His Holiness Abdu'l-Baha responded by granting permission for the construction of the Baha'i House of Worship in a tablet dated 7th June 1903. And here it is. Here's the tablet. So this is Abdu'l-Baha's tablet that he responded. Abdu'l-Baha writes, O ye who are attracted, O ye who are firm, O ye who are zealous in the service of the cause of God and are sacrificers of possessions and lives for the promotion of the word of God. I perused your recent letter, and my heart was filled with joy through its beautify meanings and its eloquent contents. Truly, they were suggested by the breaths of confirmation from the glorious Lord. O friends of Abdu'l-Baha and his co-sharers and partners in the servitude of the Lord of hosts, verily the greatest affair and the most important matter today is to establish a Mashulescar and to found a temple from which the voice of praisings may rise to the kingdom of the majestic Lord. Blessings be upon you for having thought to do so and intending to erect such an edifice, advancing all in devoting your wealth in this great purpose and in this splendid work. You will soon see the angels of confirmation following after you, and the hosts of reinforcement crowding before you. When the Mashulescar is accomplished, when the lights are emanating therefrom, the righteous ones are presenting themselves therein. The prayers are performed with supplication towards the mysterious kingdom of heaven. The voice of glorification is raised to the Lord, the Supreme. Then the believers shall rejoice, the hearts shall be dilated, and overflow of the love of the all-living and self-existent God. The people shall hasten to worship in that heavenly temple. The fragrances of God will be elevated. The divine teachings will be established in the hearts like the establishment of the Spirit in mankind. The people will then stand firm in the cause of your Lord, the merciful. Praise and greetings be upon you. So there we are. This is Abdu'l-Baha's response to that committee, right? In 1902. So Abdu'l-Baha responded 7th June 1903 in this tablet. Abdu'l-Baha provided constant guidance on the design as well as the architectural form of the temple through various tablets that he wrote to the American Baha'i community, as well as counsels he gave to the American pilgrims who visited him in the Holy Land. In 1907, Abdu'l-Baha highlighted the significance and importance of building the Mashulescar in Chicago and described how it would contribute to the unity and prosperity of the cause. These messages resulted in a new surge of activity and increased contributions by assemblies and individuals. So what happened? This is so interesting. What happened? This House of Spirituality of Chicago invited representatives from various cities to attend a meeting. This meeting was so important. 27th November 1907, to consult on this project. A committee of 9 people was appointed by the convention to coordinate and oversee the work of this temple. April 9th, 1908, the first 2 building lots for the temple were purchased. And on 19th June, Abdu'l-Baha lovingly directed the Baha'is of Chicago to hold another national convention for the temple with 1 representative selected from each community around the country. This convention was held on the 22nd and 23rd of March, 1909 in Chicago, and the proceedings opened with the reading of a tablet received from Abdu'l-Baha. The convention created a Baha'i Temple Unity Committee to undertake the work of the construction of the temple and other Baha'i activities of national importance until the formation of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States and Canada. So this Baha'i Temple Unity Committee evolved into the National Spiritual Assembly of the United States and Canada in 1925, if you recall. So as mentioned, on May 1st, 1912, Abdu'l-Baha visited this temple site, and he personally laid the cornerstone of the building. The purchase of the temple land was completed in 1914, with contributions received from both within the United States and abroad. The architectural design of the temple, developed by Louis J. Bourgeois, was presented to the convention held in New York in 1920 as a large plaster model. The construction of Caisson Foundations began 17th December 1920 with a contract given to Mr. Avery Brundage. And here's a picture of His Holiness Abdu'l-Baha. And this is when he declared, "The temple is already built." This is a picture, March 21st, 1909. This is the first Baha'i Temple Unity Convention in Chicago. These are our spiritual descendants. These were the ones that had the vision, they had the courage, they had the passion, they had the zeal, unstinting devotion. They were the ones that were the trailblazers. And this is so interesting. On Tuesday, April 27th, in the afternoon session of the convention, the design for the Mashulescar at Wilmette, Illinois, was finally chosen by the 49 delegates present. Designs were submitted by 3 architects, Louis Bourgeois, William Sutherland Maxwell, and Charles Mason Reamy. And Louis Bourgeois' design was chosen by a majority vote of the delegates. Upon Reamy's proposal, the decision to adopt Bourgeois' plan was made unanimous. The work of boring the ground for the foundation of the building was started on September 24th, 1920. And here he is. This is the great architect, Louis Bourgeois. So this is the architect of the Mother Temple of the West, the Mashulescar. And this is his plan of the Baha'i temple here. This is a facsimile of a page that's coming from the architectural record, June 1920. So this was submitted in 1920 to the architectural record. So this is rather small, and I wanted to have this read because it's just interesting, because this is he is writing, this was him per se being talking about the model. The model designed by Louis J. Bourgeois for the great Baha'i temple to be built in Chicago is attracting much attention from architects. It is of unusual interest from several points of view. The temple is a new and original form in architecture, the first new idea in architecture since the 13th century, according to Mr. H. Van Buren. Maginal, beautiful in the harmony of its proportions. It has, in addition, a singular charm in its symbolism. And to the psychologist, it is noteworthy because the creator declares, "It is Baha'u'llah's temple. I am only the channel through which it came." In form, the temple is a nonagon or nine-sided structure, and its lower story offers a complete innovation in architecture in the use of 9 inverted half circles with a great doorway in the center of each, so that from whatsoever side one approaches the edifice, it seems to extend its arms in welcome. From dome to foundation, in its unique creation and unlike any building in existence, yet one reads in its curving beauty the story of the architecture of the world. The first floor, in its simplicity of line, suggests the Greek and Egyptian temples, while the treatment of the doors and windows is Romanesque in form and both Gothic and Arabic in the intricacy and beauty of ornamentation. The second story is Renaissance in line and Gothic in the interlaced arches of its openings. The third is restful, quiet, and Renaissance in treatment. Above it rises a lovely dome, suggestive of Byzantine forms, but above the closed top rise other beams of the dome itself like hands clasped in prayer. That's so beautiful and true. You know, it's the top looks like hands clasped in prayer, so that the dome gives the feeling of ascension and aspiration found previously in the Gothic towers alone. In the geometric forms of the ornamentation covering the columns and surrounding windows and doors of the temple, one deciphers all the religious symbols of the world. Here are the swastika cross, the circle, the triangle, the double triangle, or six-pointed star, or Solomon's seal, the magic symbol of necromancers of old. But more than this, the noble symbol of the spiritual orb or sun behind the savior of mankind, the 5-pointed star representing the man-savior, Christ, or Buddha, or Muhammad, the Greek cross, the Roman or Christian cross, and supreme above all, the wonderful 9-pointed star figured in the structure of the temple itself and appearing again and again in its ornamentation as significant of the spiritual glory in the world today. The 9-pointed star reappears in the formation of the windows and doors, which are all topped by this magnificent allegory of spiritual glory, from which extend gilded rays covering the lower surfaces and illustrating in this vivid and artistic lining the descent of the Holy Spirit. Curiously enough, this descent of the Holy Spirit was the first thing Louis J. Bourgeois pictured in his drawing of the temple. He said, I did the doors and windows of the lower story first, and then I got the entire form. The numbers 9 and 19 recur again and again in the structure of the temple, illustrating its basic principle of unity, 9 being the number of perfection, containing in itself the completion of each perfect number cycle, and 19 representing the union of God and man as manifested in life, civilization, and all things.
John, you've been reading for a while. If you want, I can take over.
Excellent. Please.
Sure. If you don't mind.
Go ahead.
His description of how he made the model is as interesting as the structure itself. But in reading it, one must remember that Bourgeois is an architect of long and wide experience. He built Gothic churches in France. Then he built them in Canada. His buildings are found in Chicago, in California, where he erected and planned the well-known house and garden of Paul de Longpré, the flower painter, and also New York. 25 years ago, he had a remarkable spiritual experience, through which he came into a knowledge of his spiritual self as well as his physical man. Then he was told that someday he would build a great temple, and he made a sketch of a circular 12-sided building at that time. Henceforth, he dreamed of his temple and tried to make a drawing of it, but he could not. He became interested in the Baha'i movement, and 9 years ago made an architectural drawing of a temple in order that he might be represented in the competition spoken at that time for the erection of a Baha'i temple in Chicago. But he said then, this is not my temple. I'm only putting it in to get a chance in the competition. If I win, I can draw the real temple. But the competition never materialized, and 4 years ago when he returned from the Baha'i convention in Boston, Bourgeois suddenly in an hour's time sketched the lower story of his temple. But he could get no further, and half dazed by the ornate splendor of this fragment, realized that he must model it, because he could never express on a flat surface the many-faced beauty of its plan. He endeavored to cut into the plaster the intricate tracery of ornament he saw, but he had never done such work, and he was obliged to ask the help of a friend skilled in the art, and after half a day's training, he went at his task successfully. He did each successive story in this way, modeling the beauty in plaster as it was revealed to him, never seeing the whole, yet saying to himself constantly, how dare I go on? Because this is so wonderful, and how can I make a dome wonderful enough to complete it? And then always the thought would come, the power that is giving you this will give you a dome the most wonderful of all. So he did the first story with its welcoming arms, and the second with its Gothic elegance, and the third with its Renaissance quiet and beauty. One morning he wakened suddenly at 3 o'clock, and knew that he was to draw the dome. He was very happy, and as his fingers flew off for a rich hour, he knew that the dome was the most wonderful of all. This is why he says, it is Baha'u'llah's temple, it is not mine. There is another side to this temple story, which is both human and appealing. It has to do with love and comprehension and faithful service. The architect is not rich, and he realized that if he worked at his model, the family income would cease, and perhaps no one would ever build his mighty temple. His wife is also an artist, but she bought a little notion store in West Englewood, and while he worked on the model, she sold ice cream and candy. Not sure if it goes on. Oh. When he would clay for...
When he needed.
When he needed clay for his first modeling, he was out of money. So he went into the garden, filled his wife's clothes basket with Dorothy Perkins roses, which covered the arbor. He took them to New York and sold them for $5, with which he bought his clay. He thought he could make the model in 3 months, but it took him 3 years. And he says his wife is really the temple builder, for had it not been for her sympathy and cheerful sacrifice, he never could have carried to completion the gigantic work. The model is now on exhibition at the Kevorkian Gallery in New York City. It was chosen for erection in Chicago by the delegates to the Baha'i Convention, held recently in New York. Its original plan demands a building 360 feet in height and 450 feet in diameter, but these figures will be halved for the Chicago structure, making a dimension of 180 by 225. The building constructed in this size will cost somewhere near $1.5 million. One naturally asks what is behind such a conception and what it means for humanity. The Baha'i movement, which is planning this stupendous creation, is the great international movement of unity and brotherhood, which arose in Persia in 1844 and extends its branches and its influence everywhere at the present time. It was first taught by Ali Muhammad, who was presently given the title of Bab or Gate, meaning a door open between heaven and earth. He foretold the coming of Baha'u'llah, who he said would appear in 19 years and would be the glory of God for all mankind through the nobility of his life and teachings. Baha'u'llah means the glory of God, and his influence penetrating all mankind and the glory shining through him will at length unite all religions, all nations, all races, banishing hatred, rancor, partisanship, in the great love which rises through realization of the fatherhood of God and the true brotherhood of mankind. Baha'u'llah died in 1892 in the prison town of Akka, Syria, to which he had been sent by those persecutors who, as in the case of all the prophets, could not distinguish light from darkness. He left the leadership of the movement in the hands of his son Abbas, also a prisoner, saying, "I have established a new covenant between God and man, and my son is the center of that covenant." His son took the title of Abdul Baha, or the servant of God, literally the slave of the glory, and in the name of Abdul Baha has already become known everywhere, the synonym for service, love, and wisdom. He was freed from imprisonment in 1908 through the action of the constitutional revolution in Turkey, and since then has traveled in Western countries, visiting America in 1912. The Baha'i Revelation, as it is sometimes called, inspires a movement, not a sect. It has a very slight organization embodied in a unity board, which manages the temple fund. The temple will be a great place of worship for all mankind. Its doors will never be closed. No priesthood will ever officiate within its walls. About it will be the gardens and fountains, and beyond these, a series of buildings devoted to the application of true religion to life, a hospital, an orphan asylum, a hospice or house of hospitality, a guild house, a university, etc. Only worship can be voiced in the temple itself. But the results of such worship are to be evidenced in these surrounding buildings, where all activities of the community will meet in the comradeship inspired by mutual counsel, from which criticism and politics shall have been banished.
Excellent. That was a long reading. Thank you, Suresh. But I included this article that came from the Architectural Record in June 1920 to give you more of a feeling of the background history of how did Mr. Louis J. Bourgeois come up with this design. And so this is his model, the plaster model that after 3 years he came up with. And it was submitted here. This is the 12th annual Baha'i Convention, was made memorable by the choice of the design for this great Mashulescar, or place of house worship, which will be erected in Chicago. The model selected was constructed by Louis J. Bourgeois of New York. It is a building of 9 sides, topped with that transparent dome. I love how that was like hands clasped in prayer. So true. That is so cool. How that insightfulness of the architectural board noticed that. The executive board of the Baha'i Temple Unity Committee decided to seek the guidance of Abdul Baha on the design. So this was his design. You saw this is his plaster model. You saw what his design is. So the board decided to seek the guidance of Abdul Baha on his design. And Mr. Bourgeois prepared some drawings of the design, and in the middle of January 1921 sailed to the Holy Land to personally share the design with Abdul Baha. So this was his drawings. This was the drawings that he drew. That he drew to present to Abdul Baha. And if any of you, dear friends, have either visited it or seen it, it doesn't quite look like this right now. This is one of the 9 entrances of the Baha'i temple. This is based upon his plaster model. So this was a recent tablet of Abdul Baha to Miss Corinne True. So this was in response. So it says, "O thou dear daughter of the kingdom, thy letter has been received and the proceedings of the convention understood. Thanks be unto God that this convention was supported by the confirmations of the kingdom of Abha, as thou didst wish it was formed and ended. Praise be unto God that the model of the Mashulescar made by Mr. Bourgeois was approved by His Honor Mr. Remy and selected by the convention. His Honor Mr. Remy is verily of perfect sincerity. He is like unto transparent water, filtered, lucid, and without any impurity." We'll see. He worked earnestly for several years, but he did not have any personal motive. He has not attachment to anything except to the cause of God. This is the spirit of the firm, and this is the characteristic of the sincere. The model of the Mashulescar is, however, too big. This is his response. The Mashulescar, however, is too big. It needs several millions of dollars for the cost of construction. If possible, Mr. Bourgeois may reproduce the same model on a smaller scale so that $1 million may suffice for its construction. This should be reconsidered only if possible. Thy services to the Mashulescar are accepted at the threshold of the Most Great One. Convey on my behalf the most wonderful Abha greetings to all the friends, especially to the House of Spirituality and other assemblies. Practice utmost affection towards thy dear daughters on my behalf. I have no opportunity to write more than this. Upon thee be the light of the most luminous. Signed, Abdul Baha Abbas. So this was translated June 12, 1920. Okay?
I love the fact that his model was so ambitious. It was like 400 feet tall that Abdul Baha says, this is too big. Like, yeah,
it looks great. No question. It looks great. No question. But yeah, Abdul Baha's like, cut it back, cut it back. So there you go. He says he can't afford it. Okay, so then after seeing the design, Abdul Baha indicated to Corinne True in that tablet that the design was too large and costly. And accordingly, Mr. Bourgeois modified the plan and the construction of the temple commenced. And in 1925, the beloved guardian Shoghi Effendi advised the American Baha'i community not to start the next stage of the project until they had accumulated $400,000. Okay, so that was a criterion to start the next stage. The superstructure of the temple was completed and handed over at the opening of the convention in 1931. And the beloved guardian set the completion of the exterior of the temple as one of the goals of North American Baha'i community's first 7-year plan that started in 1937. And as you all recall, that this letter, Advent to Divine Justice, the beloved guardian repeats that as one of the goals, the exterior ornamentation as one of the goals of the first 7-year plan.
I just checked, and in 1925, $400,000 equates to about $6.2 million for today.
Yeah, and think about small Baha'i community, small Baha'i community having that much capital, and that's significant. But God, these souls were self-sacrificing. They were champions. And it's $6.2 million with that number of friends, negligible in resources. They really sacrificed. And remember the time, 1920s. This is coming up around the time of the Great Depression. I can't remember the time of Great Depression off the top of my head, but this is around the time of Great Depression period. So coming up with $6 million for a Baha'i temple, that is an unbelievable achievement that this Baha'i community did. The Baha'i temple consists of a steel superstructure. So it's all steel on which ornate precast concrete panels are hung. So it was not only an architectural feat, and that's why it's in that architectural magazine, an article that I just read, and Suresh John just read. It's an incredible architectural feat, but it's also extremely beautiful. So it's novel, it's beautiful, and to be able to do something of such scale and size is a first. So as mentioned, completion of the superstructure. This was the 1931 picture. The superstructure was completed. And right here, if your eyes are good enough, right here you can see a circle. Do you see this, my dear friends? That's Miss Corinne True. So that's Miss Corinne True, the mother of the temple, Miss Corinne True, right there. And we're going to talk about who she was later on, okay? So this is the Baha'i booth in communications building of the 1939 New York World's Fair. Behind the temple model, there it is, there's the temple model, 1939. So this temple model was displayed everywhere, literally everywhere. I mean, when you're talking about silent teacher, it really was. Even before it came into being, the model itself went everywhere, and it was promulgated in every gathering, and so much interest was garnered by to the Baha'i faith, to the principles of the teachings, to the novice idea of this architectural design. Why is this huge structure going to be erected in Wilmette, Illinois, in this suburban community? And it was just garnering so much interest. And so this is the architectural design, the revised architectural design. So let's scroll back. So this is the revised architectural design. You can see how it looks slimmer down. It looks like it lost 100 pounds around its waistline. So if you scroll back, you can see kind of chunkier. It's got nice hips in this one, it's more spread out and bigger. And then, it looks much cleaner, And so this is his revised design. So this was Louis Bourgeois' revised design. This was his architectural model, his plaster model, and it is on display in another location. And here is Amatul Bahari Khanum standing beside his architectural model right there. And again, another display. I mean, it's so many locations. This model was on display all over the place. I mean, it really was so prominent, and everyone wanted this to be featured. So let's just let me check my time. Yeah, we're great. We're still good. So here, this is a little clip I have. This is the dedication of the Baha'i temple in 1953. So in 1953, the house of worship was dedicated. So let's watch this.
During his visit to America in 1912, Abdu'l-Baha laid with his own hands the cornerstone of the first Baha'i house of worship in the West, at Wilmette, Illinois. After more than 40 years, Through the selfless and sacrificial efforts of the Baha'i friends, the house of worship was completed. Among those honored and later elevated to the rank of Hand of the Cause for their contributions was Siegfried Schopflocher. In addition to his devoted services, he pledged major sums to the building works, which during the Great Depression constituted very significant amounts. The Guardian referred to him as the chief temple builder. Corinne True, another Hand of the Cause to be, championed the temple project. Following a petition to Abdu'l-Baha to raise funds for the building of the House of Worship in America, the master consented and charged Corinne with the responsibility to raise it. It was her tireless and selfless devotion over the next 50 years, in the face of many difficulties, that finally saw the completion of the Mother Temple of the West. She and hundreds of other friends were to witness the official opening. A future Hand of the Cause, Mr. Paul Haney, introduces Amatul Baha, Ruhi
Shoghi Effendi Rabbani, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, has sent his wife, Amatul Baha Ruhiya Khanum, as his personal representative to present a message of dedication from him as the world leader of the Baha'i faith.
On behalf of the guardian of the faith of Baha'u'llah, I have the great honor of dedicating this first Mashulescar of the Western world to public worship. Initiated 50 years ago, its foundation stone laid by Abdu'l-Baha, the son of the founder of the faith, raised by contributions from its followers all over the world, reared in the vicinity of the first Baha'i center established in the West. This house of worship, now opening wide its doors to peoples of all creeds, of all races, of all nations, and of all classes, is dedicated to three fundamental verities animating and underlying the Baha'i faith: the unity of God, the unity of his prophets, the unity of mankind. I greet and welcome you on behalf of the guardian of our faith within these walls, and invite you to share with us the words recorded in the sacred scriptures, which we believe to be the repositories of the eternal and fundamental truths revealed by God in various ages, for the guidance and salvation of all mankind.
The program approved by the Guardian included as readers a number of Hands of the Cause who'd been appointed in 1951 and 1952.
الحمد لله الذي أنزل الكتاب على عبده بالحق ليكون للعالمين سراجا وهاجا.
Mr. Khadem's chanting from the Qayyum al-Asma, the Bab's commentary on the Surah of Joseph, had been foreshadowed by the Guardian years earlier, when Mr. Khadem was on pilgrimage.
يا أهل الأرض من أتوا ذكر الله بكتابه هوزوا فقد أتوا الله.
Mr. Furatan, a member of the First National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of Iran, on which he was to serve on successive occasions as secretary.
حبا لله ولعباده بر این امر عظیم خطیر قیام نمایی.
Mr. Sanandari had the unique honor amongst the existing Hands of the Cause of having attained the presence of Baha'u'llah.
دست قدرت از جیب قوت برآ ری نفوس در گل مانده را نجات.
There we go. So that was the opening program for the House of Worship. And I believe I have one more video. Yep, we have time. I'll show you this one. This is cool.
One can say that the Baha'i community built this house of worship, but it would be equally true to say that this temple built the Baha'i community. In the early part of the 20th century, there were fewer than 1,000 Baha'is in North America. Abdul Baha, who was the son of the founder of the Baha'i faith and at the time was still a prisoner in the Middle East, he approved the project. And immediately, Baha'is were faced with the challenge, well, of how do we organize according to Baha'i principles? So for example, we had this principle of the equality of men and women. And of course, this was in the early part of the 20th century. Women didn't have the right to vote. They were largely excluded from public affairs. And from the very beginning, the Baha'i community challenged that notion. And women actually became leaders in the construction of this temple. A number of architects submitted their concepts. And it was interesting that a lot of those initial designs reflected either sort of an Eastern look and feel or more of a Western or Christian look and feel for this temple. But there was one design that was put forward by a French-Canadian architect by the name of Louis Bourgeois. He had had this vision that his mission in life would be to build a temple of unity for all of humanity. And he worked for, they say, 7 or 8 years. And he's created a new kind of language of religious architecture that reflects a concept of unity of religion. When people see a Baha'i house of worship in the middle of the North American continent here in Chicago, maybe the first assumption is that it was built by an immigrant community, that these were Iranians that came and built this temple. And that's not the case at all. The builders of this house of worship were North American Baha'is of all walks of life. The temple project took almost 50 years from the time it was first conceived to the time it was open to public worship in 1953. And if you think about those years in history and how tumultuous they were, there were 2 world wars, there was the Great Depression, but it became a global project for the Baha'is. And I think that's why the spirit of this place is so powerful.
Yeah. So here's just a few more amazing pictures of this incredible house of worship. So we will close there for today before we go to securing the allegiance of royalty, which is so cool too. So we're going to close our session there for today. Hope you enjoyed our session today, getting into paragraph 17 and really getting into this, what other community to its name has erected such an edifice in such a short period of time, you know? And so today we went through the history of how this house of worship, this Mashulescar, came into being. So next week, we'll get into securing the allegiance of royalty and other questions that the beloved guardian got into in that paragraph 17. So thank you so much. And if anyone has any questions before we have our closing prayer, feel free to.
I just wanted to say that, to my eye, the North American House of Worship looks somewhat similar to the Shrine of the Bab. It's got a similar dome, and it's not exactly similar, but they both have a dome at least. And I was thinking, is it older than the dome of the Shrine of the Bab? Because I know the Shrine of the Bab, by 1900, it was not built at all. I think by 1920 it was starting to be built. Maybe it was just like a you know, the foundation was built. Mm-hmm. But I was wondering, I think this house of worship might be even older than the Shrine of the Bab.
Well, it's when it was completed. Well, it's a great question. Suresh, the Shrine of the Bab went through several stages, as you know. So there was someone as Abdul Baha constructed the mausoleum portion, and then later on during the ministry of the guardian, he erected the superstructure and the ornamentation portion. And it was, I have to, later on, there's another part when we get in talking about William Sutherland Maxwell and talking about when he did the design for the superstructure portion and the exact years. I can't think of it exactly off the top of my head. But interestingly, one of the architects for this house of worship was William Sutherland Maxwell. So, and I have the designs for all of them, but I didn't want to include them because this is not per se a historical study of everything. It would be, but the design of William Sutherland Maxwell for this house of worship is very similar-ish to the Shrine of the Bab. It was just an observation, but it's I totally go with the architectural review, talking about how there is different Renaissance and Gothic and all those different architectural designs going through it, and so it's totally open to all forms and modes and welcoming. And the dome having that type of hands clasp, it's very well written. That's why I wanted to include that. But yeah, there's a legislative building in Canada that was designed by William Sutherland Maxwell, and it stands today. It's an incredible structure. And when we get to that section covering William Sutherland Maxwell, because William Sutherland Maxwell, as you all know, he was the architect and designer of the shrine of the superstructure for the Shrine of the Bab. And when we get to that section, I have pictures of his design of the legislative building that stands in Canada. And go look that one up, because if before we even get to that one, because that's very interesting. Because when you look at that building that stands today, and it's an amazing building for tourism. The main building looks very similar to the archives.
Oh.
Okay. The superstructure part of the legislative building looks very similar to the Shrine of the Bab. So you could see in that one building, he uses very similar design parts and he won numerous awards for that design for the legislative building. And the beloved guardian loved his implementation of the design elements. And so when he asked him to design the superstructure for the Shrine of the Bab, he designed it in this, I guess, from what he knew. So, but you can see that in the legislative building.
Thank you.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you so much, and wishing you all a wonderful week. And let's have our closing prayer. Thank you very much, Jeremiah.
O my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word among the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the host of thy glorious kingdom, and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes among all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent, and the doer of whatsoever thou willest. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was such a rich history.
Thank you.